What is going on, my fellow comic book readers, collectors, and enthusiasts alike? I am your host, Alt, here at Control-Alt-Defeat Comics, and today it is Tuesday, which means it is time for another Top Tuesday. And this week, I wanted to, since it is the new year, I wanted to take time to talk a little bit about retcons. That's right, retcons in comics. We're actually going to be a two-part little mini here. So this week you are getting my top 10 retcons that worked in comics, and then next week you will be getting the top 10 retcons in comics that did not work. So this week is going to be the 10 best, next week is going to be the 10 worst. So before we get into this video, let me take some time to explain a little bit what exactly is a retcon? Well, a retcon stands for retroactive continuity change, which essentially means when you make a change to something that is already established for a character or hasn't been established for a character, and make that change so that it is retroactively always been that way. For an example, this is a hypothetical and not a real example. But if they went back and if they went into a comic and revealed that Steve Rogers' real first name was actually Jeffrey, and that Steve is his middle name, and he was Jeffrey Steve Rogers, then that would be a retcon, saying that he's always been this, we just did not know it as a reader. That is the idea of a retcon. It is something that is a change that is considered a retroactive change, therefore it is a change that has always happened. It's not a new established thing. It's not Steve changing his name from Steve Rogers to Jeffrey Steve Rogers. It is us finding out that that has always been his name and we just didn't know it. So if that makes sense, that is what a retcon is. So without further ado, I would like to get into the actual video proper here. And if you go on to enjoy this video at any point, please drop a like, subscribe, or leave a comment. Any kind of feedback or conversation that you can leave on this video or on this channel is always greatly appreciated. I have recently hit 32 subscribers. I am well on my way to 100. I want to hit 100 subscribers by the end of the year, and I am well on my way to doing that. So if you have taken the time to subscribe to this channel, if you watched any of my content and you went, I want to see more, and hit that subscribe button, I want to take the time to say thank you so very much. It means the absolute world to me, and I hope I can continue to bring out content that will make you continue to say subscribe, to continue to watch and engage in this content. So without further ado, let's get into the top 10. So, starting us off at number 10, the bottom of the list here, we have got Jessica Drew not being a mutated spider. So, back in the day when Jessica Drew Spider-Woman was originally introduced in, oh my gosh, Strange Tales? Marvel Tales? Something. I think it had Tales in the name. Either way, maybe it was a Marvel team-up book. Either way, it was prior to her Jessica Drew book, and it was outside of ASM proper. When they originally created her character, they did not really, it was a rush job, essentially. They had a limited amount of time to create the character, so they cobbled up this backstory real quick that she was a spider that had been experimented on and mutated into a woman. Over the course of time, though, Marvel, as a company, realized it is kind of hard for a regular person to really, identify themselves with a sentient, living Spider-Woman. So they retroactively changed that, and we found out that that story was actually a lie fed to Jessica Drew and not the truth. So that is one. I think it did a lot for her character, and it made a lot of people able to really identify with the character going forward. And Sorry about that. And I think that was such a welcome and good change for the character. I don't know if Jessica Drew Spider-Woman as a character would have even retained nearly the level of popularity that she has had they kept the story of her being a mutated spider. So that is why I feel Jessica Drew being retconned into a human rather than a spider turned into a human is the number 10 best retcon that worked in comics. Moving on, though, to number 9. And number 9 is going to be an incredibly recent one in comics, and that is going to be the Green Door from the Incredible Hulk. I believe this was an Al Ewing change, if memory serves. But the essential idea is that Hulks, people connected to gamma energy, are connected to this thing called the Green Door. So when they die and they go to the afterlife, they can find this Green Door in the afterlife and go through this Green Door to return to the land of the living. And we actually find out that when Bruce Banner initially was involved in the Gamma accident, he died and went to the afterlife and eventually found his way to the Green Door and came back to life, and that's how we got the Hulk that we know of today. But the Green Door, and honestly the entirety of the Immortal Hulk run, really recontextualizes the Hulk mythos and really takes it from this very scientific explanation, which also has never really made sense because, like, gamma radiation just doesn't doesn't function the way that it does in the comics. So taking it and turning it into something more mystical and magical and being more connected to the one above all and the one below all and this, like, power, it makes a lot of sense, not only from a narrative perspective of why the Hulk is so powerful in terms of being able to just beat up cosmic entities on occasions. It is because he is an aspect of the one below all's power, and I think that like I said, it recontextualizes a lot of the stories with the Hulk, but it also adds a lot more to Bruce Banner as a person and why he is the way he is, which is why I had to put this at number 9. It was just too good to not put here. But that is number 9. We are going to move on to number 8. And number 8 on this list is actually going to be a little low probably for a lot of people, but my reason for it being this low is that this is a retcon that has since been retconned again and is now no longer the official canon. However, I liked this better when it was the official canon, so I am putting it on this list just pretty low. Number 8, we have got Magneto being the Scarlet Witch and Pietro Maximov's father. I loved Magneto being Quicksilver and Scarlet Witch's dad. I thought that was such a good retcon, and I was so disappointed when they once again retconned it again and made them no longer the child of Magneto. I really, really preferred it when they were related to Magneto. I thought it made sense in terms of why Scarlet Witch's powers are as insane as they are, because she comes from a incredibly powerhouse family. But I also thought it added a lot more depth to the characterizations of all three characters, and it added a lot of interesting times where they were able to do a little family dynamic between them, and I thought that was a lot of fun, and them making that change back into them changing it back doesn't really sit well with me. I think Magneto should have been Scarlet Witch and Quicksilver's dad. I think it's just such a good characterization, and it makes for an interesting family dynamic and an interesting pedigree of characters to have roaming around in the Marvel Comics continuity as well. Just like knowing that there are all of these, this whole family of insanely powerful mutants, of just like hugely powerful mutants, it was a lot of fun. So that's why I had to put this at number 8. It would be higher on the list if it hadn't been retconned out of continuity at this point. But moving on from number 8 to number 7. Number 7 on this list is going to be Captain America and Bucky Barnes not surviving World War II. Now, so this was a retcon done in the 50s for Captain America, when they eventually did a revelation that he crashed into the ice and was frozen. That was a retcon. As well, though, the other part of that was a retcon was there were comic books between the late 40s and the 50s where Cap would appear every now and again, and they utilized this retcon to explain, oh, well, that was a false Captain America. The true Captain America crashed in the 40s and has been frozen in ice and just recently gets unthawed by the Avengers. A lot of people don't even realize that that is not an original part of Captain America's story. Most people recognize that it was probably something that was added later, just given the fact that Captain America as a character was introduced during World War II. But I feel like at this point, because it is such an integral part of his character now, him being this man out of time, this person from the past trying to adjust to a different future, it is such an integral part of who Captain America is now. Sorry if you hear my cat scratching her scratch pad in the background. It is such an integral part of who Captain America is and all of his stories now that so many people don't even realize that the original story for Cap did not have him frozen in ice for X amount of years. But instead, he survived. They continued on past World War II and lived their lives. And like I said, this retconned that and changed quite a bit of things throughout Marvel for the better, and it gave us the reintroduction of Captain America going forward as a usable character, and it gave us the what is now definitive Captain America story of him being frozen and being unthawed years later. So I had to put this on this list, given how popular it is, given how it has completely altered and changed the entire mythos of the character. So that is why it is at number 7. Moving on to number 6. And number 6 on this list is going to go to Wolverine's multiple power retcons. Now, this is multifold, actually, because this is not a single retcon. There are multiple retcons within this listing. But first of all, originally, a lot of people don't realize this, Wolverine's claws were not a part of his body at first. They were a part of his gloves. And that was eventually retconned and changed to them being a part of his body. And then eventually it was retconned even further to claim that he had this healing factor, which was how he was able to survive having this insanely powerful metal grafted onto his skeleton. Then you've got the bone claws, which is another retcon of his power set, showing that he was always able to create the claws prior to the good old-fashioned chrome dip. That is a really good retcon. Wolverine now, when you think of Wolverine, you think of this character whom they have metal bonded to their skeleton, they have this crazy healing factor, and they have these claws that come out of their knuckles and are usually a little painful when they come out. Right? But that was not always the case. Back in the day, Wolverine was just kind of a dude in a costume with some claw weapons that he could use and stuff. Like, he wasn't really the same character that we know now. And so, even his name, even the Logan versus James Howlett thing is also a retcon. Wolverine has had a lot of retcons over the years, between like the Weapon X, Weapon 10 thing, and all these other different retcons. Wolverine has had probably the most retcons in comic book history. He's been actively involved in time travel shenanigans that retconned his entire timeline and whatnot. Wolverine is just in general a character that is full of retcons, but a lot of them, not all of them, a lot of them are really well done. These ones in particular, I think, are some of the best done retcons in comics, which is why it had to go to number 6. Moving on to number 5. And number 5 is going to be the first DC comic on this list. At number 5, we have got Alfred's new origin story from The Dark Knight Returns. Originally, prior to this story, Alfred had become Bruce Wayne's butler as an adult after Thomas and Martha Wayne's death and everything. Bruce hires him after the fact. This comic, The Dark Knight Returns, retconned that and revealed that Alfred was actually Bruce's butler as a child. He left for a small bit of time and then comes back after Thomas and Martha's death, allowing for Bruce and Alfred to have a much deeper connected history with each other due to him knowing Bruce since he was a child and having worked with Bruce's parents while Bruce was a child. This recontextualizes a lot of stories with Alfred, but it also just completely changed the character of Alfred in such a meaningful way. And now it is the definitive origin story for Alfred, that Alfred was Bruce's butler prior to his parents' death. And it actually establishes in almost every continuity such a fantastic relationship between Bruce and Alfred that probably would not be there, at least not to the same extent, had this retcon and change not been made. This giving them that history, that connection, as well as, again, it gives Bruce a reason to trust Alfred in a deeper way. And I think all of that serves to better push forth the story that you're trying to tell there. And I think it better pushes this narrative of, not narrative, it helps better solidify why Bruce would have Alfred assisting him as Batman, why Bruce would tell Alfred he is Batman when he has refused to tell so many people. And it's so good, and it changes the way you think about the character. It completely altered the character's entire story. So now that is kind of the story that it's always been, and it's fantastic. There are so many people who don't even realize that that is not an original part of Alfred, and that is something that was retconned in later. And I feel like that's a big sign of a good retcon. When a retcon is so well received, so good, that people forget what the pre-retcon story was and only remember the retcon as though that is just always how the story has been. I think that is a huge positive sign of a good, well-done retcon. When people forget about the actual, true, original story, because the retcon is just so much more popular, so much more well-known, and so much more enjoyed by people, right? So that is why I had to put this at number 5. Moving on to number 4. And at number 4, this could probably be higher on the list, honestly, but there's so many good things coming up. At number 4, we've got Magneto being a Holocaust survivor. Again, this is one of those situations that this is such an integral and important part of Magneto's character in the modern day that a lot of people probably don't even realize that Magneto was not originally written as a Jewish Holocaust survivor. However, making him a survivor of humanity's absolute worst atrocity, being somebody who has seen the literal worst of the worst that humanity could ever have possibly done, it is so good in terms of pushing this, idea or narrative around Magneto, pushing this Magneto as thinking that humans cannot be trusted, that humans are inferior to mutants, that humans are bad and wrong, and giving him this superiority complex. That is kind of where it comes from, where it stems from. Not that he hasn't seen time and time again humans oppress, harm, or mistreat others, especially mutant kind, but the Holocaust in particular is the biggest sort of reasoning for him being as anti-human and pro-mutant as he is. And I think that change fundamentally altered who Magneto as a character would be in comics going forward forever. And Magneto has never been the same character he was prior to that retcon. And it's just such a well-done story. And I can't get enough of... I love the idea of this villain having been a Holocaust survivor. I feel like it just adds so much more depth to the character, and it also adds a lot of interesting, like, ideas that you can do with, like, him having been this tortured, mistreated Jewish person who was made to suffer by the German people. That is an interesting story, and I love it, and that's why I've got to put this at number 4, because Magneto being a Holocaust survivor is just such a great story, and it is something that we have consistently kept ever since it was first introduced, and for that reason alone, I have to put it at number 4. Moving on to number 3. And again, this is another one that I think could be higher up on the list, but the last 2 after this are just so good that I couldn't bear to move them. So, number 3 on this list, we have got Hal Jordan and Parallax being separate entities, and that Hal Jordan did not actually turn evil. So back in the day, in the Emerald Twilight Green Lantern story arc, we saw a Hal Jordan calling himself Parallax and going through and killing off members of the Green Lantern and taking their rings for himself, collecting a very large amount of power rings to try and acquire and amass a large amount of power. Later on in the Jeff Johns Green Lantern run during Rebirth, we get the return of Hal Jordan after he spends some time as the Spectre, and we are revealed that the Parallax entity is a sentient fear being that resides within the Green Lantern power battery and is essentially what took over Hal Jordan and made him do those evil, horrific things, and Hal had no desire to actually do so. This also helped establish why they've always had a weakness to yellow, or at least for a long time. The Green Lanterns have had a weakness to the color yellow, and this helped establish what actually caused that weakness to the color yellow, as well as it sees the return of Sinestro and Hal Jordan, and it's overall is just really good. But I think the idea that they were able to redeem Hal Jordan and make it to where he was, able to be a character again, essentially, I think that was so good, and that's why I had to put this at number 3. Moving on to my number 2 spot. And sitting at number 2, we have got Alan Moore's take on Swamp Thing. That is right, Swamp Thing by Alan Moore. For those of you who don't know, prior to the Alan Moore run on Swamp Thing had been a scientist who had an accident happen to them that turned them into this sentient plant creature. Alan Moore's run actually reveals to us that Swamp Thing was never the human. I forget his human name, even, to be honest with you, but he was never that human. He was a plant that gained sentience during the accident. The human died, and Swamp Thing just basically took continued on its life and took on its responsibilities and whatnot. And took on its name, took on its likeness. But as it turns out, it was not a human being. It was a plant that gained sentience through the power of the green. And I think that's such a better story for the character, and it allows you to take the character into some very existential sort of storylines that are very much like what is alive and what isn't alive, like what makes something alive, what am I, who am I, like who is this person, like why do I have their memories, am I them because I have their memories, and like all this other stuff that's very interesting and very philosophical, and it really makes you think, which is really good. And again, another one of those stories that became the definitive story for Swamp Thing and the definitive origin for Swamp Thing going forward. So that is why I had to put Alan Moore's Swamp Thing retcon at my number 2 retcon that worked. Now we are moving on to the number 1 spot. A lot of you have probably figured this out because you've noticed that it is not listed on here yet. That is right. Number 1 on this list is going to be Bucky Barnes surviving World War II and becoming the Winter Soldier. For those of you who don't know, Bucky Barnes originally was Captain America's sidekick, and he perished in the battle against, not Zemo, maybe Red Skull. He perished during a battle, and that was the end of it. But then eventually we get this story where you get a character called the Winter Soldier. And as it turns out, the Winter Soldier is Bucky Barnes, who has been brought back to life by the Russian government and completely brainwashed into becoming a Russian sleeper agent. It's essentially the same story that you get in Captain America Winter Soldier, the movie, with a few little extra things here and there that you didn't get in the movie due to either rights or just whatever reason. But this in particular, it becomes, it's not just a definitive origin story for a hero, it is a new hero altogether. It is a character that, not only is he a new hero, this is a character that even was able to replace Captain America for a time as Captain America. This is a character who is so integrally important now to Marvel Comics that most Marvel Comics readers could not imagine a world where the Winter Soldier as a concept didn't exist. But the only reason Winter Soldier exists is because of a retcon to bring back Bucky Barnes and allow him to be a character again. And again, this is a retcon that was done so well that it is completely altered not just that character's mythos, it has altered Captain America's entire story, it has altered so many other characters' storylines, and it has even allowed that character to take on the mantle of Captain America himself at some point throughout the comics. It is so well done, so well written, and I cannot think of a more deserving or better written retcon in comic book history than the Bucky Barnes Winter Soldier retcon. That is why that has to go to my number 1 spot. And with that said, that is going to bring us to the end of this top 10 and therefore the end of this video. Once again, if you guys enjoyed this video at any point, please leave a like, comment, or subscribe. Any kind of feedback or conversation you can leave this channel is always greatly appreciated. I would love to sit down and have a conversation with you about comic books. If you want to talk about your favorite retcons, I love talking comics. Comic books are my passion, and if you're watching this channel, I imagine they are yours as well. So please go ahead and leave a comment down below, and let's get into a conversation about your favorite or least favorite retcons in comic books. Thank you for checking out this video. I hope you check out my channel to see more comic content in the future. Thank you again for watching this. I hope to see you back next week for our top 10 worst retcons in comics, and I will see you tomorrow for New Comic Book Day. Have yourselves a fantastic day, a fantastic week, and I will see you in my next video. Goodbye.